hard to believe 5 years. Yes, I have been involved for the whole of these 5 years, and I think I led my first sit in April of 2020. So, yeah, thanks, Mark. Um, just a quick note that the Passover supplement is in response to the times that we're in, and this will be the first time that I'm offering a virtual uh, component to the Omer journey. So stay tuned. You'll find information if you text me. If you fill out on my website, you'll get follow-up information with registration. So as we're talking about the challenging times in which we live, we are stepping very close to a kind of an unusual holiday this week, Purim, which is Thursday night. And when we think of Purim, we often think of costumes and silliness and upside downness and poking fun. But the Purim story is actually quite a powerful story. And I'm thinking particularly right now about the way the story closes. So we know that we have been threatened, that we overcame the threat, that Haman, the bad guy, was hung. But what happens at the end of the Purim story is very, very serious. The Jews are given permission to avenge themselves. And first, there are 500 people that they kill, and the 10 sons of Haman. And this is just right in Shushan, but there is this war going on around in other provinces. And Esther asks for permission to do this one more day. And the total, we're told in chapter 9, verse 16, is that they killed 75,000 of those who hated them. That's a lot of people. And we may draw parallels in our world today. What I want to bring our attention to, however, is that on the Shabbat right before Purim, we read from a special Torah portion which talks about Amalek. Amalek was a bad guy, and he surprised the Israelites as they were walking through the land and took all of the stragglers and all of the vulnerable people from behind them. And we learn from Rabbi Schneerson, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe of Chabad. He says that the gematria of the Hebrew letters that spell Amalek is 240, which is the same value as the letters of the word Safek, which is doubt. And he calls doubt something that's baseless and irrational. And he cautions us, I think, not just to be acknowledging those around us who are living from their doubt, but he invites us, I think, to look at our own. And further, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch says that we are supposed to remember what Amalek did to us to ensure that we do not become Amalek within ourselves, denying what's right and seeking to exploit power. So as we prepare for Purim this week, I'd like us to bring our attention in our meditation to places where we may currently feel doubt or fear or anger. Places that we may feel so pushed inside of ourselves to feel that what only we can bring forward is a reaction. And I invite us to spend time with those places and see how we can calm and heal ourselves. So let's find our space. You need to readjust your posture. This would be a good time to do that. Feel your spine lifting upwards from your hips. Allow your legs to fall from your hip joints. Feel them resting on the chair or the cushion beneath you. Let your lower legs drop to the ground. Feel the support of the ground beneath your feet. Allowing energy to simply run through your torso, through your pelvic girdle, down through your thighs, through your knees, down your legs, and out your feet. Draining fear, uncertainty, discomfort, anxiety. And bring your awareness up a little higher into your middle, below your solar plexus. Allow that to drain as well, down. Feel your breath. Softening as your abdomen expands and contracts with each in-breath and out-breath. And see here if there is energy of tension or angst that you would like to allow to drain down, down through your body and into the earth. Notice your heart. Is it feeling open? Is it feeling tentative? Is it shut? If it feels right, you might take your fingers of one hand and gently bring them over your heart, stroking, letting yourself know that wherever you are right now, you are okay. And wherever you are, it is okay. And perhaps bringing your hand up just a little bit to rest below your collarbones, on your sternum. This place is in front of the thymus gland, the thymus which regulates our immunity. And when we are stressed, it has more work to do. Perhaps softening right here and letting your thymus know that you are safe. And let any energy here drain down as well. Notice your spine. Are there places where you feel a lift, allowing you to stretch upwards? Are there places that feel held, tightened, with hurt, uncertainty, rage, the ferocity of seeking justice? Fear. Notice them. And as if you could put your own hand anywhere on your back and caress and embrace your vulnerability. See a hand or several hands there to hold you, to acknowledge your experience, to remind you that you are whole and that you are blessed. And we bring our attention to our neck and throat. Are we holding here? Are there words that are needing to be spoken? Screams we want to let out. Hurt we want to cry. Allow that to flow down as well. And we bring our attention to our head, our scalp, letting it breathe. Letting our eyes soften. Our eyebrows soften. Our foreheads. All the muscles of the face. And inside of our heads, our brains, allowing our brains to soften. To be supported by the fluid around them. To be held by the magnanimous beauty that is the creator of all. there's somewhere that still needs your focus to be cared for, to be held, to be nourished. Bring your awareness there. And we'll sit for a few minutes. In these last few minutes, I invite you to feel your love. Feel your kindness. Feel your safety. And know that you can call these forth in the challenges we face. Gently, we bring our attention back to our own space and to this shared space.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Robin Damsky, for the beautiful re-entry into our shared practice today. I want to welcome those of you who were not with us at the very beginning. Welcome back. And as always, we seal the practice by offering an opportunity for those of you who are in mourning or observing a yard site, or if it's your custom to join in the mourner's Kaddish, to do so and to put the name or names of those you're honoring in the chat now or after you recite Kaddish. And if you are reciting Kaddish, I invite you to join me by rising in body or spirit. You can unmute at this time. If you're not reciting Kaddish now, we hope that you'll just stay present and offer your support and compassion for those who are grieving. Yitkadal, Yitkadas, B'nai Rabba, Amad Yirach V'yamlich Malchutei, V'chayechon U'vyamechon U'chaye B'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala B'zman Kariv Amen.
Amen.
Yehi Shmei Rabba
Amen.
L'olam Amen.
Amen.
Yitbarach V'yishtabach Har V'yitamam V'yitnaseh Bit Hadar V'yitaleh V'yitala Shmei Kedusha B'ritu La'ela Kol Birchata V'shirata Tush B'chalta V'nechemata V'miran B'alma V'ru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Maya Amin Malenu V'yafinu Amin Useh Shalom V'mamam Uyaseh Shalom Leinu V'yal Kol Yoshvei Vel Amen.
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 Friends, thanks so much for joining us today. Welcome back, everyone. It's good to be back together. Just a reminder that we'll be led tomorrow by Rabbi Shefa Gold, Wednesday, which marks our fifth anniversary of the Daily Sit. I'll be leading on Thursday, Zach Newman of Hamakom, and on Friday, we're really delighted to be welcoming back Sabrina Sojourner, who will be leading us to sit into Shabbat together. Also, it will be Purim. Feel free to come in costume or not, as you like. We'll try to stuff some Hamantaschen through the microphone, get it a little bit to everybody. But it will be good to be together as we move through the Jewish calendar together. Thanks to Rachel Huget for holding our text space today, as always, with skill and grace. Thanks to Marianne Wennick, who sponsored today's practice in honor of her children and grandchildren, the IJS spiritual leaders and morning sit leaders. And Marianne, thank you again so much for your generosity in supporting our practice. And as always, you're invited to stay on, join us for conversation with our teacher today, Rabbi Robin Damsky. And if you have a question you'd like to share, please put it in the chat. And I will keep an eye out for that. I'm just looking at the chat now. I see there have been some losses in our community, and I want to send our condolences from the whole group to those of you who have suffered recent losses and those of you who are commemorating losses at this time. And I'm glad that we have this opportunity to offer support and comfort in this time of loss for you. Robin, I see a lot of appreciation, so that's really wonderful. I'm going to pick up on what Holly just wrote. I need a good, thorough draining. It's interesting because I never actually, I mean, I'm sure people have used that word drain in a meditation before, but it was really so helpful and effective, I thought. We need a lot of ongoing drainage for sure. And I want to connect it with what you were offering about, about Purim and what's the problematic aspect of the Megillah and this past Shabbat's reading about Amalek, because it's obviously timely, important, and appreciate, your honesty in noting that, what's problematic. I think it's chapter 9, right, of the Megillah.
Yeah,
And by the way,
right.
there is some project called the Chapter 9 Project, and maybe do you know?
I don't know.
No, there's maybe through Rabbi Amichai Lau-Levi, I think in the
Oh,
Lab Shul in New York,
yeah.
a project to create alternatives to Chapter 9, which is an interesting project. Um, anyway, Chapter 9, as you mentioned, is a very kind of brutal description of vengeance, right?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
for most of Jewish history was in the kind of fantasy realm, right? And then we have this a tale about Amalek on Shabbat, which seems to be on the surface about the external Amalek, and the characteristic that defines Amalek, as he said, is the inclination to prey on the vulnerable and the weak. Um, and we also have, I think, as you mentioned also, within our tradition, this idea that, Amalek is not just an external enemy, but also an internal process that we all have the potential to pick on and look to prey on what's on the vulnerable, whether others who are vulnerable or to prey on our own vulnerabilities. So to bring that together with the drainage, my experience today was of really kind of noticing that Amalek energy externally and internally. And I loved, the guided imagery of just letting that drain away was very, very restorative. So that's by way of appreciation. I want to see if you wanted to elaborate on any of those aspects of the themes that you raised, whether
Yeah.
I'm awake
So
or.
I find myself being really uncomfortable with this chapter. And I was in a Torah study on Shabbat where we talked about the fact that in some communities it's not read. And I'm sorry, this chapter of the Purim story, that in some communities it's not read, and I'd be interested to see what Amichai Lau-Levi might be doing with it, because while I have really struggled with texts in our tradition, often they're texts about how women are seen. I really was called to say, if we get rid of these texts, we don't have the opportunity to learn from them.
Mhm,
And there is a lot of power, I think, in this text for us to say, oh my God, what happened? And if we pull it to today, so many of us are feeling so threatened by what's happening in this country and around the world, but a lot right here in this country, that we can react from a place of fear and maybe even beyond fear, terror,
mhm,
which can cause us to make choices that can be really destructive and that we might regret on the small scale, or they can be destructive even on the large scale. And so to stop and say, when do I feel terrorized? And am I feeling terrorized right now?
mhm,
What is my inclination? Is my inclination to pull in, which is a famous one for me? Is my inclination to strike out, which I think is what happens at the end of the Purim story?
mhm,
It's my inclination to to alchemize
Mm-hmm.
and say, this could be poison, or it could be food for for healing and caring.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where the inspiration was for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of the draining is that when I am completely like caught up, right, in all of that, I'm not in a very clear place to make a choice.
Yeah.
If I let bit by bit, I let it just seep out. And I often think of this as like liquid light. Just let it, liquid energy that we release, let it
Mm-hmm.
drain out so that we can then replenish ourselves with goodness,
Yeah.
with clarity, with better choices. And maybe even, because I see there was something here in the chat, Karen K.
Yeah.
Karen Key, um, who's having a really terrible time feeling safe and centered in meditation. The intergenerational trauma, right, and the ancestral wounds. I get it, Karen. That to me is one of the values of letting the draining happen, so that I can stop and say, where am I being activated from? And can I literally, can I put a hand on that place and tell myself, I have other choices. And it's okay to be afraid. And it's okay to be unsure. And maybe, Karen, and to all of us, maybe that's where we need to sit for a while to breathe. My own experiences with this, Karen, is that the more I breathe into that, the more I let it go. It is not a comfortable process. If I can be rigorous and yet kind enough with myself at the same time to stay with where I feel activated, my experience is that it changes. So,
Yeah. Thanks for all of that, Robin. I just want to add on to that. First of all, Karen, thank you for that. And I think it's probably pretty clear. You speak for many of us. You're not alone at all. But appreciate the honesty and vulnerability that particularly challenging times as we've been through over these 5 years. That just to add on to what you're saying, Robin, two things. One is in terms of meditation that in addressing in bringing a trauma informed perspective to practice, it's important to know that first of all, you don't have to have your eyes closed for meditation. That it's perfectly fine to, if you're finding when one finds oneself outside one's what's called a window of tolerance, feeling activated, or as you were saying, Robin, those noticing those habitual reactions of fight, flight, or freeze, that it's fine to open eyes. It's good to look behind you, look around you, look at your surroundings, maybe to use sound as an anchor, to look up at the sky, to look outside, to look at a tree. And then the other thing I was going to say and invite you to think about and share on this, Robin, is the paradox about what we learn about Amalek from that passage that was read on Shabbat, which is that we're enjoined to remember Amalek, remember what Amalek did. And when we get to the land, to remember to wipe out the memory, not to forget to wipe out the memory, which is the paradox. What do you mean? Like, remember to not remember.
yeah.
And I think that goes to this question about how we are the memories, which are reflected in intergenerational trauma that's passed down and inherited, that although there can be actual dangers today, it's good to discern what is actually happening right now, right?
Mhm.
So when
Right.
we quote, get to the land, that is where I am right now. I want to
Yeah.
be able to note, oh, this is, a lot of this is inherited and I'm not endangered at this moment right now, which is not to say there aren't dangers. There are dangers, but the question is to have proper perspective. So I don't want to invite you to how do you make sense of that paradox that is in the Torah passage?
It's interesting because First of all, it is quite the paradox, and my mind is in several places. One is there's the recognition of how we can let that memory control us. And maybe that's the piece of the forgetting. I like to say that we can forgive, and yet there's a power in in the forgiveness. I'd like to say that the forgiveness in many cases is forgiveness in here, because we may all have experienced hurt or harm or violation from someone outside. And that may not ever be something that we have the capacity to change. But what we have the capacity to change is here. And so my forgiveness is not to say that what happened is okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's to say that where I'm holding this in me is in my way.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps that's part of the remembering and forgetting. Maybe it's the forgetting, forgetting to be activated by the reaction that I have to this kind of assault. And, you know, I have history with studying the triangle of a victim, hero, persecutor, because it's a part of my past. And what I learned is that you can move around the triangle, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can have been the victim and you can be the hero. And all of a sudden, at some point, without even recognizing it, you are the persecutor. And the
Mm-hmm.
only way to come out of that triangle is literally to come out of the triangle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's challenging. And I think that speaks to ancestral memory and to saying, I do not want to, propagate or promulgate this pattern. It stops here.
Mm-hmm.
And Gail said, what do I mean by it's okay to be afraid? All of our feelings are real. And for us to be able to say, yes, I feel this. Not that we want to cultivate being afraid, but we want to tell the truth about it. Because when we tell the truth about it and we breathe, that old impermanence that Buddhism teaches, in a few minutes, some of that will soften and maybe even dissipate or drain out. That doesn't mean it won't be reactivated, but we have more. The more we practice, the more choice we have in the matter.
Before we end, I just want to throw in also the other thing that came up for me that you alluded to in this conversation, that the draining is one part of the practice, but as given your emphasis on earth-based practice, I imagine that you will also appreciate. I like the idea of also drawing up from the earth, just as we could sometimes focus on the breath and exhaling something and then inhaling something, we can discharge, that drain into the earth and draw up from the earth. A lot of the qualities, and people in the chat, I think, noted this quite a bit.
Yeah.
Draw up the qualities we need and have the sense of solidity, connection to the planet, and to the incredible resilience of this planet, although we are testing that to the hilt.
Yeah.
We can definitely be supported in our resilience by the planet's resilience.
Yeah. Beautiful for that. And I want to say
I feel
two
like I'm
things.
preaching to the choir. We're definitely
Yeah, no, it's
choir.
great. Because what I learned about gravity and dance is that we think that gravity pulls us down, like we fall, right? But it also pushes us up. It does both things. And when I do the draining, what I often imagine is that it then opens me up to bring in power, to bring in joy, to bring in whatever I need to bring in from light, so that there's this kind of internal filling and this external draining. And it can certainly come up in the other direction. It's we may find that in certain situations one speaks more than the other, or that we do both.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
All
I
right.
didn't get to all your questions, everybody.
No, great questions. We tried to bring them all in best we can. As always, Robin, thanks so much for beautiful guidance
Thank
today,
you.
and really great to get back into our regular schedule with you leading off today. So thanks for batting lead off. Thanks to Rachel for holding our space so well, as always, and to each of you for showing up. Great to have you back. Look forward to practice tomorrow. Actually, with Rabbi Shefa Gold, a number of people mentioned how helpful singing and chanting can be. So we'll look forward to chanting with Rabbi Shefa tomorrow at our usual time. Many blessings, everyone. Stay safe,
Thank
stay
you,
well.
everybody.
Okay.
Be well. Thanks, Mark.